Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Pacem and Terris, written by Pope John XXIII in 1963. Section 3. Relations between States. With respect to states themselves, our predecessors have constantly taught, and we wish to lend the weight of our own authority to their teaching, that nations are the subjects of reciprocal rights and duties. The relationships, therefore, must be likewise harmonized in accordance with the dictates of truth, justice, willing cooperation, and freedom. The same law of nature that governs the life and conduct of individuals must also regulate the relations of political communities with one another. This will be readily understood when one reflects that it is quite impossible for political leaders to lay aside their natural dignity while acting in their country's name and in its interests. They are still bound by the natural law, which is the rule that governs all moral conduct. They have no authority to depart from its slightest precepts. The idea that men, by the very fact of their appointment to public office, are compelled to lay aside their own humanity is quite inconceivable. The very attainment to this high-ranking office was due to their exceptional gifts and intellectual qualities, which earned for them the reputation as outstanding representatives of the body politic. Moreover, a ruling authority is indispensable to civil society. That is a fact which follows from the moral order itself. Such authority, therefore, cannot be misdirected against the moral order. It would immediately cease to exist, being deprived of its whole raison d'etre. God himself warns us of this. Hear, therefore, ye kings, and understand. Learn, ye that are judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, you that rule the people, and that please yourselves in multitudes of nations. For power is given you by the Lord, and strength by the Most High, who will examine your works, and search out your thoughts. And lastly, one must bear in mind that even when it regulates the relations between states, authority must be exercised for the promotion of the common good. That is the primary reason for its existence. One of the principal imperatives of the common good is the recognition of the moral order and the unfailing observance of its precepts. A firmly established order between political communities must be founded on the unshakable and unmoving rock of the moral law, that law which is revealed in the order of nature by the Creator himself, and engraved indelibly on men's hearts. Its principles are beacon lights to guide the policies of men and nations. They are also warning lights, providential signs, which men must heed if their laborious efforts to establish a new order are not to encounter perilous storms and shipwreck. The first point to be settled is that mutual ties between states must be governed by truth. Truth calls for the elimination of every trace of racial discrimination and the consequent recognition of the inviolable principle that all states are by nature equal in dignity. Each of them accordingly has the right to exist, to develop, and to possess the necessary means and accept a primary responsibility for its own development. Each is also legitimately entitled to a good name and to the respect which it is due. As we know from experience, men frequently differ widely in knowledge, virtue, intelligence, and wealth. But that is no valid argument in favor of a system whereby those who are in a position of superiority impose their will arbitrarily on others. On the contrary, such men have a greater share in the common responsibility to help others to reach perfection by their mutual efforts. So too, on the international level, some nations may have attained to a superior degree of scientific, cultural, and economic development. That does not entitle them to exert unjust political domination over other nations. It means they have to make a greater contribution to the common cause of social progress. The fact is that no one can be by nature superior to his fellows, since all men are equally noble in natural dignity, and consequently there are no differences at all between political communities from the point of view of natural dignity. Each state is like a body, the members of which are human beings. And, as we know from experience, nations can be highly sensitive in matters in any way touching their dignity and honor, and with good reason. Truth further demands an attitude of unruffled impartiality and the use of the many aids to the promotion and spread of mutual understanding between nations, which scientific progress has made available. This does not mean that people should be prevented from drawing particular attention to the virtues of their own way of life, but it does mean the utter rejection of ways of disseminating information which violates the principles of truth and justice and injure the reputation of another nation. Relations between states must furthermore be regulated by justice. This necessitates both the recognition of their mutual rights and, at the same time, the fulfillment of their respective duties. States have the right to existence, to self-development, and to the means necessary to achieve this. They have the right to play the leading part in the process of their own development, and to the right to their good name and due honors. Consequently, states are likewise in duty bound to safeguard all such rights effectively, and to avoid any action that could violate them. And just as individual men may not pursue their own private interests in a way that is unfair and detrimental to others, so too it would be criminal in a state to aim at improving itself by use of methods which involve other nations in injury and unjust oppression. There is a saying of St. Augustine which has particular relevance in this context: take away justice, and what are kingdoms but mighty bands of robbers? There may be, and sometimes is, a class of interests among states, each striving for its own development. When differences of this sort arise, they must be settled in a truly human way, not by armed force, nor by deceit or trickery. There must be a mutual assessment of the arguments and feelings on both sides, a mature and objective investigation of the situation, and an equitable reconciliation of opposing views. A special instance of this class of interests is furnished by that political trend which, since the 19th century, has become widespread throughout the world and gained in strength, as a result of which men of similar ethnic background are anxious for political autonomy and unification into a single nation. For many reasons, this cannot always be effected, and consequently minority peoples are often obliged to live within territories of a nation of a different ethnic origin. This situation gives rise to serious problems. It is quite clear that any attempt to check the vitality and growth of these ethnic minorities is a flagrant violation of justice, the more so if such perverse efforts are aimed at their very extinction. Indeed, the best interests of justice are served by those public authorities who do all they can to improve the human conditions of the members of these minority groups, especially in what concerns their language, culture, ancient traditions, and their economic activity and enterprise. It is worth noting, however, that these minority groups, in reaction perhaps to the enforced hardships of their present situation or to historical circumstances, frequently tend to magnify unduly characteristics proper to their own people. They even rate them above those human values which are common to all mankind, as though the good of the entire human family should subserve the interests of their own particular groups. A more reasonable attitude for such people to adopt would be to recognize the advantages, too, which accrue to them from their own special situation. They should realize that their constant association with the people steeped in a different civilization from their own has no small part to play in the development of their own particular genius and spirit. Little by little, they can absorb into their very being those virtues which characterize the other nation. For this to happen, these minority groups must enter into some kind of association with the people in whose midst they are living, and learn to share their customs and way of life. It will never happen if they sow seeds of disaffection, which can only produce a harvest of evils, stifling the political development of nations. Since the relationships between states must be regulated in accordance with the principles of truth and justice, states must further these relationships by taking positive steps to pool their material and spiritual resources. In many cases, this can be achieved by all kinds of mutual collaboration. This is already happening in our own day in the economic, social, political, educational, health, and athletic spheres, and with beneficial results. We must bear in mind that its very nature civil authority exists, not to confine men within the frontiers of their own nations, but primarily to protect the common good of the state, which certainly cannot be divorced from the common good of the entire human family.